Welcome to the deep dive. Today is Sunday, April 6th, 2025, and we are ready to jump into some news that's probably going to break tomorrow,
Okay.
April 7th. You gave us a really interesting piece of source material called blockchainxb.mp3, an audio file, and we're going to, as always, extract the signal from the noise so you know what's going on without having to listen to the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And it looks like we've got some pretty interesting stuff happening in the crypto and blockchain world.
Yeah.
And also some stuff happening in Dubai and the Middle East.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're going to focus on in this deep dive.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting right off the bat is just how much this audio file covers. It really does run the gamut. You know, we talk about new tariffs and how that may affect things.
Right.
And then we're going to talk about stablecoin regulation. We're going to talk about even PayPal and Venmo possibly getting into Solana and Chainlink. There's a peer-to-peer stablecoin project. And then even Kazakhstan and Saudi Arabia are making some moves in fintech.
Wow.
So there's a lot to cover.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. First off, kind of the overall crypto market sentiment as of April 7th, right before this news is about to break, is, initially after the Liberation Day announcement, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Okay.
With tariffs, they said the market sentiment was at 44, which is still in fear.
Yep.
But then specifically when you look at Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, that went down to 34, so even more fear. Now, you would think that with tariffs potentially bringing trillions of dollars into U.S. investment, that would be, a positive signal, but it's not.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it shows you how the markets, act based on psychology and not necessarily just the data. The recording mentions that prices haven't fallen further, which is kind of surprising, when you consider that most of the mainstream media has been really negative about these tariffs, but could potentially be, $7 trillion.
$7 trillion
in U.S. investments.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me how much the narrative affects the markets.
Right. It's almost like they're
Yes.
trading based on the story and not really on the data or the facts. So the global cryptocurrency market cap, as of this morning, early morning in Dubai, is $2.63 trillion. And that's down 0.38% in the last 24 hours. And these numbers will probably change by the time you're listening to this. But one thing that the recording points out that is really concerning is the stablecoin volume.
Okay.
It's incredibly low right now. Only 40.6, $3 billion. Now, that is really low.
But that's much lower than what you would normally expect to see if people were parking their crypto in stablecoins, which would be kind of a safe haven in times of uncertainty.
It's exactly.
Show this. Really could be a sign that people are just lacking conviction, or they're just waiting to see what happens.
Right. Or they're just pulling out completely.
Yeah, it's possible that they're reducing their exposure.
Yeah.
Which would make sense, given all this uncertainty.
Okay, so now let's take a look at decentralized finance.
Okay.
The total cryptocurrency market volume over the last 24 hours was $43.76 billion. That's down 25.53%. And DeFi volume is only $3.59 billion, which is 6.38% of the total.
Wow. Okay, so DeFi is really taking a hit.
Yeah, and that's still total value locked in DeFi. TVL is also down to $93.89 billion.
Okay.
Lido's still the biggest player there, but even their TVL has dropped.
Yeah.
And decentralized exchange dominance is also down to only 17.10%. That's pretty
low.
Yeah.
And it's kind of surprising because you would think that when prices are going down, people would be flocking to DXs because they're more decentralized and they're more, resistant to censorship.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be happening.
So maybe they're all going to centralized exchanges.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, that's where most of the liquidity is.
Right.
So it makes sense in a way.
Looking at the top, DX's Uniswap is leading the pack with 917.28 million in volume, followed by PancakeSwap at 753.01 million.
Okay.
And then everything else is pretty much way down the list. So back to stablecoins.
Okay.
That 24-hour volume was 40.63 billion, which the audio describes as dismal.
Yeah, I mean, it's really low.
Yeah.
Considering it's 92.83%
Right.
of the total.
Crypto market volume.
Yeah. It shows you that people are really flocking to stability and not really willing to take risks.
And if we break down those stable coins, you got Tether, USDT at 34.7 billion, Circle USDC at 4.64 billion, and Binance USD, BUSD at 1.23 billion. So those are kind of the top 3 stable coins right now.
Right. So really it looks like Tether is king of the stable coins right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's look at Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin market cap is 1.63 trillion and Ethereum is 211 billion.
Okay.
So much lower for Ethereum. Bitcoin's 24-hour trading volume is 13.64 billion. And they say that Ethereum is 211 billion as well. But
I think that's a typo.
Yeah, I think they meant to say something different.
Sure.
So Bitcoin dominance is 62.33%, which can be a little bit scary when prices are dropping.
Yeah, because it means that people are pulling their money out of altcoins and putting it into Bitcoin, which is seen as the safest bet. Yeah,
and Ethereum dominance is 8.10%, so that's slightly up.
Okay.
And Bitcoin is trading below $80,000. Right now, it's at $79,540. Down 4.30% in the last 24 hours. 3.76 in the last 7 days. Ethereum is at 1,620. That's well below. 1,700. It's down 9.53%. And 10.95 over the last 7 days. And even Ripple XRP is down. It's trading at 0.599. So just under 60 cents. Down at 6.24. And 7.23 over 7 days.
So everything's down.
Everything is down.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting here is that USDT's market cap is way higher than XRP's.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, it's 144 billion versus 116 billion.
That's incredible. Yeah. So, people are really looking for stability right now.
Yeah. We're talking about these drops in prices. Jim Cramer is predicting a Black Monday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like 1987 all over again.
And you say that historically, the opposite of what he says tends to happen.
So does that mean we're in for a bull run?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe he's wrong again. So maybe we should all be buying Bitcoin.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about those tariffs.
Okay.
The Liberation Day announcement with the tariffs. They strongly suggest that you go to the White House website to get the actual details instead of listening to the mainstream media.
Okay.
And they actually mentioned that they released 3 episodes on April 3rd that talked about the technical details of these tariffs.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they also say that President Trump has told Jerome Powell to cut interest rates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Looking at the economic data, the non-farm payroll employment numbers for March, they actually increased by 220,000 jobs, which is pretty good. And the unemployment rate is at 4.2%. So that's
pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty low.
Yeah, it is. So that could potentially have a positive impact on the market. If people actually believed the data.
It was reflected in the market sentiment.
Exactly. Yeah. They also mentioned that Elon Musk has
Elon Musk.
Yeah, he's got a new Department of Government Efficiency, which is called DOGE.
DOGE, really?
Yeah, and they're trying to cut costs in the government. Right. And they also point out that Trump's tariffs are reciprocal. So other countries are charging us more than we charge them on a lot of things.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a lot of conflicting signals here.
Yeah, there are. BlackRock's head of digital assets says that Bitcoin's institutional adoption isn't really reflected in the price yet.
Interesting.
Yeah. They also mention that Bitcoin tends to reach new all-time highs about 18 months after a halving.
Right.
So we could be looking at August to October of this year for a new all-time high.
So you're thinking Bitcoin could potentially cross 250,000?
Yeah, maybe even more. But, I'm not giving financial advice.
Oh, right, of course.
And then we've got CPI numbers coming out on April 10th. Inflation numbers. You can get those from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And with the good employment numbers, it's possible that inflation might be easing up a little bit.
Okay, so we could be seeing some relief there.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Fed is going to decide on interest rates. They're not expected to raise them. And in fact, they could even lower them. Or just leave them the same.
Yeah.
The next FOMC meeting is May 7th. There's no meeting in April.
Okay.
And they kind of speculate that maybe President Trump timed this Liberation Day around the FOMC meeting.
Yeah, that's interesting that he would take that into consideration.
Yeah.
When making these decisions.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about stablecoin regulation.
Yeah.
The President's Working Group on Financial Markets, the PWG, has said that not all stablecoins fall under securities laws.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
They say that they could fall under banking laws or commodity laws.
Okay, so they're trying to figure out.
Are they? Yeah.
Yeah.
In the regulatory landscape.
Yeah.
And, the host in the audio actually says that he thinks stablecoins are replacing banks.
Yeah.
And that they should be regulated as banks.
Right.
And they also mentioned that Dubai is going to have its own stablecoin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's probably going to be Tether USDT.
Okay.
And it's being approved by banking authorities.
So the Dubai Financial Services Regulatory Authority.
Yeah. So it sounds like they're taking this pretty seriously.
Yeah, it looks like stablecoins are really becoming a major part of the financial system.
Yeah. So the PWG report highlights the fact that stablecoins are growing rapidly and that they can make payments more efficient, but they're also concerned about the risks to users and the financial system. They're worried about people losing their money and, operational failures and systemic issues.
Okay, so they're really taking a cautious approach.
Yeah. Then they're recommending that Congress pass legislation to require stablecoin issuers to be insured depository institutions and to oversee wallet providers and to set standards for interoperability and risk management.
So they're really trying to bring them into the fold?
Yeah, of the traditional financial system.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, regulators are going to use their existing tools to oversee stablecoin activity.
Okay, so they're not waiting around for Congress to act. They're going to do what they can with what they have.
Okay, so there's an unconfirmed report from Decrypt that says PayPal and Vendo are going to allow their users to buy, sell, hold, and transfer Solana and Chainlink tokens.
Oh, wow. So SOL and Link.
Yeah. So that would be a big expansion.
From just Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Right. And they say Tesla and LA prices went up after this news came out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so there's this peer-to-peer stablecoin project called P2Me.
P2Me, okay.
Yeah. And they've raised $2 million in funding from
Coin
and Coinbase Ventures.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And they want to facilitate payments with stablecoins through a network of middlemen. So they're basically bypassing banks.
Interesting.
Yeah. They're using QR codes.
Okay.
And they're emphasizing privacy with zero knowledge proofs.
Zero knowledge proofs. Wow.
Yeah. They say they've already processed $1.6 million in payments across Indonesia, Nigeria, and Vietnam.
Okay.
And they're planning to expand into Latin America. And they're going to have a community token.
Wow. So they're going all in.
Yeah. So. But the audio does question, how feasible zero knowledge proofs are for individual transactions.
Yeah, they're pretty expensive.
And complicated.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, for sure. And it does kind of go back to the original definition of Bitcoin, peer-to-peer electronic cash.
They're kind of theory. Live up to that.
Yeah.
That's clear. If this stablecoin is actually algorithmically backed or if it's more like a centralized stablecoin.
Yeah. I mean, how are they going to implement those zero knowledge proofs on a blockchain?
And how much is it going to cost? Okay. And what about block size?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at some fintech developments.
Okay.
Kazakhstan, yeah. They are working with the UAE to advance fintech investment and capital market development.
Oh, okay, so they're partnering up.
Yeah. They had a delegation from Kazakhstan visit the UAE back in March, and they had representatives from the National Bank of Kazakhstan and the Astana International Financial Center. And they met with the UAE central bank governor and other financial regulators. And they talked about macroeconomic trends and digital asset regulations. And they signed a memorandum of understanding.
Wow. So they're really serious about working together.
To cooperate on fintech and cybersecurity and digital currencies. And they also talked to the UAE Securities and Commodities Authority. CAN-CC and AIX trading results and the Tabadul digital exchange platform. And they also exchanged experiences. on blockchain and digital asset regulations with a Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority of the UAE.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, ERA. And they had meetings with ADGM and DFSA to discuss financial center regulations. So they're really trying to
level their capital markets.